It was nearly 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, and the Walmart Supercenter in Bridgewater was practically empty. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that cold, pale glow that makes everything feel sterile, almost too quiet. Derek, a night shift stalker, had been working here for 5 years. He was used to strange little things during the graveyard shift, occasional power flickers, doors slamming from the air conditioning, even the occasional confused customer wandering in at midnight. But this night would be different. As Derek walked toward the home goods section, pushing a pallet of boxes, he noticed something odd. Down the main aisle, a single shopping cart was slowly rolling forward, but there was no one near it. The wheels squeaked softly, echoing in the vast, empty store. At first, he thought it must be from the cleaning crew, but the janitor, Miguel, was way over by electronics, vacuuming the floor. Derek frowned, watching the cart continue its slow journey until it stopped abruptly in front of aisle 17, the seasonal section. A shiver ran through him. The floor in that area wasn't sloped. He knew because he'd worked that section countless times. And yet, the cart had moved in a perfect straight line, almost like it had a destination. Trying to shake off the unease, Derek pushed on with his work. But an hour later, it happened again. This time, the cart was coming from the opposite direction, rolling toward aisle 17 again. Derek decided to test it. He grabbed the cart, pushed it toward the garden center, completely opposite from where it had been heading, and left it there. 20 minutes later, as he rounded the corner from groceries, his stomach dropped. The cart was back in front of aisle 17, like it had never been moved. Now his curiosity turned into something darker. He radioed Mike, the overnight manager, and asked if they could pull the security footage. They went into the back office, where the wall of screens flickered with grainy camera feeds. Mike rewound the footage, and that's when both men went silent. On the screen, the cart sat alone in the garden center. Suddenly, it began to roll, slowly at first, then picking up speed. But what froze them wasn't the movement. It was the faint, almost transparent figure behind it. A tall, thin silhouette, blurry like bad reception, its hands barely touching the cart's handle. The figure guided it in a straight path toward aisle 17, then simply faded away before the cart stopped. Mike leaned back in his chair, pale. "Glitch in the camera feed," he muttered, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Derek didn't reply. He was staring at the frozen frame, at aisle 17. That section had been changed multiple times over the years, but tonight, it was stocked with artificial flowers and memorial wreaths. They decided to keep an eye on it. The next night, Derek arrived early and checked aisle 17. The air there felt heavier, almost humid, even though the rest of the store was freezing from the AC. As his shift went on, he started hearing faint squeaks like cartwheels, even when no customers were around. Sometimes it came from behind him, but every time he turned, the aisle was empty. By the third night, Derek's nerves were frayed. He avoided aisle 17 entirely, choosing to work on the opposite side of the store. But as he was clocking out at 4 a.m., he saw something that made him freeze. There, just inside the entrance, was the cart. Its handle was wet, not with water, but something sticky and dark, like old rust or dried blood. The security footage for that night, gone. The file had been corrupted according to IT. The store manager decided to quietly remove aisle 17 from rotation, spreading the memorial wreaths and flowers across other sections. But the cart, it still appeared, sometimes in front of electronics, sometimes in produce, yet always, somehow, ending up in the exact same spot where the phantom figure first left it. Derek still works there, though he refuses to close anymore. And if you ask him about the cart, he won't answer. He'll just tell you one thing. If you're in Walmart after midnight and you see a lone cart in the aisle, don't touch it. And whatever you do, never follow it. Kyle had worked the overnight shift at Walmart long enough to know every quirk of the store after dark. The hum of the freezers and frozen foods. The faint flicker of the fluorescent light above aisle 14. The way the air conditioning always seemed colder than it needed to be, as if the building itself wanted you to leave. On this Tuesday night, the parking lot was almost empty when he arrived for his shift at 11 p.m. Only a few scattered cars sat under the dim yellow lights. Most of them belonged to his fellow night staff, but there was one beat-up old sedan parked far from the entrance, its driver's seat empty and the interior swallowed in shadow. He thought nothing of it at the time. Inside, the store felt too quiet. The speakers played soft elevator music, but it sounded far away, muffled, like it was leaking through the walls rather than coming from the ceiling. Kyle grabbed his stock card and scanned his task sheet for the night. Organize clearance section. Check for damaged items. Restock where needed. The clearance section was in the far back corner, a cluttered stretch of mismatched shelves filled with half-forgotten goods, old holiday decorations, faded toy boxes with dented corners, kitchen appliances missing their manuals. That part of the store always felt colder, and the light seemed dimmer, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor. As he pushed his cart into the aisle, he saw her, a woman standing motionless in front of a rack of discounted winter coats. Her back was to him, her head tilted slightly to the right as if she were listening to something only she could hear. "Evening, ma'am," Kyle said, keeping his voice light. No reaction. He moved closer, the wheels of his cart squeaking against the tile. Her hand rose slowly and began to glide along the sleeves of the coats, her long fingernails making a faint scraping sound against the fabric. The sound was oddly rhythmic, almost like she was tracing a pattern. "Store closes in an hour," he said, "just letting you know." She froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion, resting on the arm of a navy blue parka. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and hoarse, like she hadn't used it in a long time. "They don't like it when you're here this late." Kyle frowned. Who doesn't like it? Her head began to turn toward him, but it didn't turn naturally. It shifted in small, stiff jerks like an old doll's head being twisted by hand. When her face came into view, he felt his stomach drop. Her skin was pale and stretched thin like paper over bone. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and glistened in the dim light. Her lips were pulled back into a small, unnatural smile that never reached her eyes. "The ones in the mirrors," she whispered. "They don't like when you stay past midnight." Kyle's eyes darted around. There were no mirrors in the clearance aisle, only shelves, racks, and merchandise. But the way she said it made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. When he turned back to her, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound of clothes shifting on the rack. Just gone. The aisle was empty, but the air felt heavier, colder. Kyle walked quickly to the end of the row, peering left and right. He saw no one. He tried to shrug it off, blaming his exhaustion and the eerie vibe of the store at night. But later, during his break, he passed through electronics and glanced at the wall of security monitors. One of the feeds caught his eye, the clearance aisle. She was there, standing in the exact same spot. Only this time she wasn't browsing. She was staring straight at the camera, her lips curved into that same smile. Kyle leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. The feed glitched for half a second. When it cleared, the aisle was empty. He didn't sleep well that night. In fact, for the next 2 days, he kept replaying that image in his mind. Her lifeless stare locked onto the lens, as though she knew exactly where he was watching from. On the third night, he quit. And every time he drove past that Walmart afterward, He couldn't help but glance toward the clearance section windows, just to make sure she wasn't still there. I'd been working the overnight shift at Walmart for almost half a year when it happened, and I still can't set foot in that building without feeling uneasy. It was one of those dead quiet Tuesday nights, the kind where the air feels heavier somehow, like the world has slowed down. We had just finished unloading a truck, and my supervisor told me to take my break early. I didn't argue. My legs ached, and my hands were sore from breaking down boxes. The break room was tucked in the very back of the store, down a long, narrow hallway with dull white walls and humming fluorescent lights. By the time I reached it, I already felt separated from the rest of the building. Out on the sales floor, you can still hear the faint sound of a radio playing somewhere or the echo of carts moving. But here, it was silent. I swiped my badge and stepped inside. The air felt stale, almost as if the room hadn't been used in days. The smell of burnt coffee lingered, along with something faintly metallic, like old pennies. I glanced at the vending machines, then at the table in the corner, and froze. There was a man sitting there. He wasn't in a Walmart uniform. He wore a faded red flannel shirt and dark jeans, clothes that looked like they'd been washed too many times. His posture was strange, slouched, but perfectly still, with his hands clasped tightly together on the table as though he were praying or thinking deeply. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to acknowledge me. He didn't move. Finally, I forced a small, awkward laugh. Hey." No response. I walked past him toward the microwave, my footsteps sounding uncomfortably loud on the linoleum floor. I sat down at the opposite end of the table and unwrapped my sandwich. Every so often, I glanced at him. His head was still bowed. Not once did he shift or blink. The longer I sat there, the heavier the air seemed to get. There's something about being in a closed space with someone who refuses to acknowledge you. It starts to feel like the walls are leaning in. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Do you work nights here?" This time he reacted. Slowly, unnervingly slowly, he lifted his head. I wish I hadn't asked. His skin looked pale. Not just pale, but grayish, like someone who'd been outside in freezing weather too long. His lips were cracked, almost colorless, and his eyes were solid black. No whites, no light reflecting off them. Just an endless, ink-like void. A slow smile spread across his face, but it wasn't friendly. It was thin, deliberate, and without warmth. I felt a wave of cold rush through me, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was pushing my chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. My hand was already reaching for the door handle, and that's when the lights went out. The room plunged into complete darkness, not dim, total black. I froze, too scared to move, my fingers trembling against the cold metal handle. And then a whisper. It came from right next to my ear, not across the room and right beside me. It said my name, slowly, drawing out each syllable like it was tasting it. I slammed the door open and stumbled into the hallway. The bright fluorescent lights out there nearly blinded me, but I didn't care. I turned back to look, and the break room was empty. No man, no chair pulled out, no sign anyone had been there. When I asked my supervisor about it later, he looked confused. He told me I was the only one on break at that time, and the cameras showed no one entering or leaving the break room in the last hour. I worked at that store for another 3 months, but I never used that break room again. Every time I walked past its door, I swore I could still smell that faint metallic scent, and I'd hear the echo of that whisper in my head, saying my name in the dark. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.